From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The Mexican prosecutor has confirmed one person who was part of the migrant caravan has died. The man in his 20s reportedly fell from a truck. The vehicle was heading towards the city of Huixtla. Thousands of migrants heading to the U.S. have left the town of Tapachula in Mexico towards the town of Huixtla. There are reportedly 3,000 migrants in the group that is leaving Tapachula. Another group of thousands is still trying to cross the border between Mexico and Guatemala. Mexican authorities have tried to stop the flow of migrants, but many have crossed the river in makeshift rafts. Authorities in Chiapas say that over the past 3 days, over 1,000 asylum requests have been processed at the border. Over 300 of the migrants have been relocated to federal shelters after being considered especially vulnerable. Authorities have said the government's main goal is to protect migrants' rights. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Eduardo Martinez, tells us more.
I'm in the fairground that the Mexican government turned into a shelter, but some migrants have said they haven't been able to communicate with their family members that were moved to these facilities. Social activists visited the shelters. They say there are over 1,000 people in there who cannot communicate with their loved ones and are not allowed to leave their premises. Activists have accused the government of making this shelter a migrant center, popularly known as migrant jails.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said his government will begin to cut aid to Central American countries for failing to stop the caravan. He also made claims that criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixing with the migrants and that this is a national emergency. Those making up the caravan have responded to Trump's claims.
The only thing we're looking for is for an opportunity to reach the US, to be able to work. Most people here are poor. If we had the economic means to enter the US legally, then we wouldn't make this huge sacrifice, suffering the terrible heat. You saw what happened yesterday. People fainted from the heat.
Trump's tweet is very worrying. He doesn't know what we've suffered, as he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Well, we didn't. If he put himself in our shoes, it would be very different. If he walked what we walk, he never walks.
A UN spokesman has confirmed that over 7,000 people have joined the caravan. Farhan Haq cited figures from the International Organization for Migration.
Large numbers of people are arriving in Mexico today and are likely to remain in the country for an extended period. And at this time, it is estimated that the caravan comprises some 7,233 persons, many of whom intend to continue the march north.
On Sunday, the caravan arrived to the first stop over the southern state of Chiapas.
From very early in the morning, thousands of migrants left the bordering city of Hidalgo. Step by step, they made the over 7-hour trek towards Tapachula, Chiapas.
We want them to support us, to support our children, women and men, to give us security and protection, because we left Honduras without anything.
With punishing 30-degree heat bearing down on them, they battled exhaustion, hunger, and blistered feet. But they refused to stop. The caravan pushes on to the promised land as they walked along Federal Road 200.
I'm making the journey so that I can have a better life, because there we can no longer live and survive there. The government does not help us. People are starving in Honduras, and the president does not help us at all.
Mexico's government closed the border bridge, but the people of Mexico stood in solidarity with the migrants and their cause and lent them assistance.
We all need help, and maybe we also have to migrate to another country at some point. So this is why we must also help others.
We ask the authorities to open the way for these people to cross because they are here in desperate need of help.
As they continued the 40-meter trek, migrants only stopped once. Federal police tried to persuade them to get into buses that, according to the commissioner, will take them to shelters.
It's a big shelter. There are doctors, water, baths. We have assured them.
However, among the more than 5,000 Central American migrants, many mistrust and fear to be deported. People from the migrant caravan say they will only rest if absolutely necessary. They hope to arrive to the capital in less than 15 days.
Eduardo Martínez, Telesur.
The far-right candidate in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has promised to exile or imprison his opponents if they don't submit to the law. In a speech to supporters, the former army captain said that if elected, he will use the armed forces to combat any violence which may follow his election. He said he will seek permission from Congress. He also said he will use the army for street patrols and described the country as being at war.
If this bunch want to stay here, they'll have to submit to our law. Otherwise, they'll have to leave or go to prison. These low-life Reds will be banished from our country.
Different evangelical groups have created movements against the far-right candidate. They have instead thrown their support behind the Workers' Party presidential candidate, Fernando Haddad. Reportedly, this was in reaction to statements by some evangelical leaders who say people who truly believe in God should vote for Bolsonaro. However, for these movements, Bolsonaro represents violence, and they see him as the opposite of what the Bible teaches. Environmental analysts have also spoke out about Bolsonaro's economic policy. They said it's an ancient vision that sees the environment as an obstacle.
It represents a vision of the environment of maybe 50, 100 years ago, or even before that, of the 29th century. As those, we had to conquer the territory, instead of looking at the environment as an asset. Our biodiversity can generate multiple forms of wealth.
For his part, Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has been campaigning in the state of Maranhão. His supporters are calling for the defense of democracy and recovery of the economy. Haddad told them there is still time to defeat the far-right campaign. The latest polls put Haddad just 6 points behind Bolsonaro, or at 47% against a 53% for the far-right candidate. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, is following Haddad's campaign. He brings us details about his recent visit to a recycling plant.
Here in Sao Paulo, garbage processing is an enormous task. So the Comare Collective transforms garbage into recycled materials. Fernando Haddad has come to visit this plant to support the work of these people, and also to announce a 20% increase in subsidies for low-income families. He also announced a limit on the increase of the price of gas. This event is taking place after demonstrations in support of Jair Bolsonaro, which happened on Sunday in Paulista Avenue. It's worth mentioning that in a recent video, Jair Bolsonaro said that if he wins the presidency, he will sweep away the left wing. Various social movements have continued to reject Bolsonaro's candidacy and have stated that a meeting like today's with Haddad would not be able to happen if the far-right candidate were to win. That is why they say Sunday's vote is crucial. Another video surfaced this weekend, this time of Jair Bolsonaro's son, lawmaker Eduardo Bolsonaro, where he warns a possible shutdown of Brazil's Supreme Electoral Court and possibly imprisoning the court's judges.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Almost 800 organizations and social leaders in Colombia have asked Pope Francis to ask President Iván Duque to resume the peace talks. In a letter, they asked the Pope to support the dialogue. Activists also say the government, the Church, and the United Nations had to examine the process 70 days ago, but hasn't happened yet. Pope Francis has met with Colombian President Iván Duque in the Vatican. They discussed the reintegration of FARC members into society, the peace dialogue with the National Liberation Army, and Church contribution to the process. They also addressed ways of protecting of social leaders.
We can resume the dialogue with the National Liberation Army, but only if their members agree to free all those kidnapped and to ending violence and criminal actions.
Former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass has started a hunger strike after being moved to a new prison. Glass lawyer Eduardo Franco Loor has confirmed that the strike on Twitter. Glass was sentenced to 6 years in prison for allegedly receiving illicit payments from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Earlier, Loor condemned the conditions in which the former vice president is being held.
We are making the authorities responsible for the life and well-being of Jorge Glass. He's not in good health, and now his rights are being violated, mainly his right for mediation in front of a judge. Glass has requested the annulment of his sentence given his innocence. We are condemning this violation of his human rights and sending complaints to the UN and the IACHR.
Still in Ecuador, a trans woman who was reportedly tortured and murdered in the province of Cotopaxi. According to trans activists, the woman was attacked by 5 people who threw stones at her. She eventually died from her injuries. Transgender rights organizations are demanding the government find the killers and guarantee the safety of the members of the LGBTQ community. A U.S. Navy hospital ship has arrived to Ecuador to provide medical assistance with the help of over 900 crew members. The ship is also expected to visit Peru, Colombia, and Honduras. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the details.
Hello, yes, indeed. We are outside the authority port on the Ecuadorian coast in the province of Esmeraldas, where the U.S. Navy hospital ship arrived. The USNS Comfort will conduct a medical assistance mission as part of the U.S. Promise Assistance among all South America. Health officials will select patients with medical needs to be evaluated on board. Around 750 patients will be strengthened by the U.S. authorities. But despite this communication, people here outside the authority port are demanding irregularities among this process. They say the Ecuadorian authorities and also the U.S. authorities, they didn't give their needs to be treated in this hospital ship. It is the 6th deployment to provide medical assistance in the region, and also this hospital ship will visit Peru, Colombia, and Honduras. This is all we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
Hundreds of families across Trinidad and Tobago are in cleanup mode. This after massive flooding destroyed many neighborhoods. A national disaster was declared after heavy rains over the weekend. As relief efforts continue, there is also a flow of goodwill. Many caring citizens have opened their doors to those left homeless. Meanwhile, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro is among regional leaders who have contacted Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, to offer assistance. Dr. Rowley expressed thanks, but indicated that Trinidad and Tobago is coping for the moment. The Met Office warns that an adverse weather warning is still in effect.
Also happy to report that despite the warnings we had from the Met Office, in the last 48 hours we have not had the level of rain activity that was predicted. Thank God for that. It has allowed water to run off with the use of the tides, etc. as well. We are still not out of the woods, as they say. We expect this to continue into tomorrow morning, but fortunately at this stage I'm happy to report that the vast majority of the water is running off.
Our correspondent Kijan Hayes is in Lorquera, Trinidad, and has more details.
It's day 2 of the massive cleanup exercise happening in Greenfield. As you can see, this is a major exercise where not just residents but hundreds of volunteers are out helping to clean, and it's not being made any easier. As you can see, the rain is coming down once again. Now, the government has allocated $25 million for this cleanup exercise. Many are saying that's not enough. As you can see, every house on this street, every house all over is completely destroyed, and most people have lost all of their possessions. The government of Trinidad and Tobago also reaching out to regional bodies to collect some more money to help with the insurance and the rebuilding efforts. So a lot of work being done here. Now, this is just one section. This is East Trinidad. There are reports of flooding in South, Central and further east Trinidad. So this is a mammoth national disaster, as the Prime Minister called it. Highways have only just reopened and very few people went out to work today. Most people either trying to get their stuff fixed or just could not leave their homes. They've been marooned. So this is, again, a lot of work that needs to be done, and this is just the beginning.
October 22nd in Argentina marks 41 years of unceasing effort by the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo to find their missing family members. These women have been relentless in their struggle to find more than 500 grandchildren who went missing during the last military dictatorship. Over 40 decades of searching, 128 granddaughters and grandsons have been identified. This also drives the process of justice related to the right to identity. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. A vehicle that could belong to the Saudi consulate has been found in a garage park in Istanbul. Turkish police says the abandoned car was found in the suburbs and seems to include a diplomatic number plate. Authorities continue to investigate the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. On Friday, Saudi authorities admitted that Khashoggi died in the premises. Cameroon has re-elected Paul Biya as president for a 7th presidential term. Biya has ruled the country since 1982. Violence in the polls increased after allegations of widespread fraud. Biya is the second African leader who has been in power for so long after Equatorial Guinea President Teodoro Obiang. An official from South Africa's African National Congress has been killed in Cape Town. A police report said Luyanda Mbele, a councillor, and his cousin were shot by unknown assailants on Sunday night. More than 100 ANC officials and members have been killed in the last 2 years. Nigerian pro-Biafra leader Nnamdi Kanu has revealed he is in Israel after missing for years. He has called on his followers to boycott Nigeria's upcoming elections. A unilateral declaration of independence by the Igbo people in 1967 sparked a brutal civil war that left more than 1 million dead. The Zambian government has revived plans to slaughter up to 2,000 hippos in the next 5 years. The government suspended the plans in 2016 after protests by animal rights activists, but authorities say the plan will continue because the hippo population could not be supported by the water levels in the Lugawa River. They said moving them elsewhere could be too costly. Russia has said that if will forced to respond in kind if the U.S. starts developing new missiles after quitting the ENF treaty. The Kremlin said quitting the Cold War Area Treaty would raise the possibility of worldwide arms race. The treaty was originally signed in 1987 and required the elimination of short and immediate-range nuclear and conventional missiles by both countries.
Any action in this field will be met with an appropriate response because strategic stability can be secured only on the basis of parity, and parity will be kept under all circumstances. We bear responsibility for global stability and expect the U.S. to bear its share of the responsibility.
LGBTQ activists in the U.S. have protested against administration of Donald Trump for trying to remove trans people from official recognition. They gathered outside the White House to denounce the news that Trump is too narrowly defining gender. Once the gender of a child has been registered at birth as either male or female, it won't be able to be changed. The Department of Health and Human Services has declined to comment. Thousands of unclaimed urns are piling up across Japan in the back of city offices. The identities of the dead are usually known and were claimed at public expense, but in most cases the remains haven't been collected by relatives despite the request to do so. The abandoned remains highlight social, economic, and demographic changes in Japan, where more elderly live on welfare and families are more scattered. We come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.